So welcome back. We're going to continue our discussion with lobbying. So to lobby is to basically advocate some sort of a position to government. Just say what's on your mind or say what you want. And lobbyists articulate basically any sort of interest in the sweep of American pluralism. Lobbyists are typically seen as negative when we talk about it from the popular press, but you have to remember, lobbyists take a huge variety of information, what their constituents want, or the people what they represent want, and they translate that stuff, those desires or those interests, to politicians in a way that they can understand. In some ways, I think about lobbyists, they're almost like translators. From one language to another, from the jargon of businesses and elements of society into political speak, a way that politicians can understand. And they do that, of course, it's not just through semantics, but it's also the fact that lobbyists have access. It's not like I feel that, policy X, me as a private individual, feel that policy X, Y, and Z is wrong. It's not like I can just call my senator and say, hey, Senator Smith, I want this, this, and this. It doesn't work that way. But a lobbyist, I can contact a lobbyist, and through favors or payments, or I can get all my friends together to speak to a lobbyist. That lobbyist does have that access to see Senator Smith, and not just the access, but can explain my issues in a way that the politician will actually understand. It is said that lobbyists who lack integrity, who deliberately distort information, can basically be out of a job. I don't know, that's kind of a gray area. But what they are essentially is translators. It is a way of exercising free speech for those who may not get to exercise that speech, again, for a variety of reasons. And there's different ways to lobby. So you have contact lobbying and background lobbying. Let's talk about contact lobbying first. So contact lobbying basically means that you are interacting directly with government officials or staff in a variety of meetings, telephone calls, emails. It's basically that kind of direct interaction. Do any of you know how you as private citizens can interact with your favorite politician, whether it's the president or congressman or anyone else? You can actually write them. You can send them letters or emails, and what you can request, for example, a congressional inquiry if you feel that some sort of a wrong has been done. You can actually write the president, the vice president, you can write the first lady, you can write your local politician anytime that you feel that members of a federal organization have performed some sort of a wrong. Or you can write your senators or representatives if you feel that something in your state, a state organization, is committing some sort of a wrong. I know that when I was in the Army, I was in a unit that, I won't go into all the details, but we had congressional complaints lodged against us all the time. We had to answer about 600 of them. Yeah, it was about 600 of them, best I remember. And most of it had to do with issues of pay and some other things. But they wrote their local congressman, and that stuff would go all the way up to the top of the chain of the military command, all the way down to us, and I'd have to write a response explaining why their pay wasn't what they thought it should be. It would go up to the next chain of command, all the way back up to the top, all the way back to that congressperson, and then back to the person who sent that letter. So they get a big packet. That would be their response. I've also seen people that have written their congresspeople, this happened a lot in the Army, that they were upset about not getting promoted or all sorts of things. I had a guy actually write his congressperson saying that he didn't get a Purple Heart from Vietnam, and we had to, he had been in our unit, but back in the Vietnam era, and we had to respond to that as well. So anytime you see some sort of a wrong that you think has occurred with a federal or a state government organization, you can write to your congressperson and you will get a response. It may not be the response you wanted, but you will get a response. There's also background lobbying. And background lobbying is indirect lobbying. So that's when you are trying to build friendly relations with lawmakers, their officials, or their staff. You have to remember, I don't know if any of you have ever seen a politician, but you know, it's never just Senator Smith walking around by his or herself. There's always this entourage of people with him. They're like, you know, there's aides and there's administrators and all sorts of kinds of people. And background lobbying is not necessarily going straight to the senator, directly to the senator, but going and speaking to the entourage. And that's background lobbying, trying to get those staff members to support your position because they're the ones that have the direct contact with your favorite politician. And then, of course, there's also grassroots lobbying. Grassroots lobbying basically means getting the public to support some sort of a position or interest. You may see on TV, they'll say, write your congressman to support Prop 421. And, you know, of course, that's on TV and you get interested in it, you write your congressperson and you engage in kind of a contact or direct form of lobbying. But the people that funded the ad are engaging in grassroots lobbying. So, lobbyists are regulated at the federal level. It's not the best. I mean, there's the Lobbying Disclosure Act. The House and Senate, of course, have enacted rules to prevent the appearance of impropriety. And, of course, they've made it a criminal act for public officials to ask or receive any sort of a gift or a gratuity tied to an official act. In other words, bribery. It is not allowed for there to be any sort of implied quid pro quo or something for something. So if you just wanted to give a gift to a senator just because you think they're great, that's very different than giving a gift to a senator in exchange for passing a specific piece of legislation. If you were to give a gift or any sort of a gratuity or financial sum to your favorite politician, that would be bribery. But if it was just a gift with no strings attached whatsoever, then that's not necessarily bribery. However, sometimes it can be hard to distinguish between what is making good relations with a politician and actually giving them something in exchange for something else. Now, there have been a lot of discussions about the appearance of impropriety in elections, and it started with the election of Teddy Roosevelt in 1904. However, his opponent, Alton Parker, had pointed out that Teddy Roosevelt took in large cash contributions from corporations to finance his campaign. And so in 1907, our friends in the Progressive Party helped to pass the Tillman Act, which made it a crime for banks and corporations to give funds directly to candidates in federal elections, and that's still applicable today. By the way, let's make this one of our a federal election is any sort of an election for president, vice president, senator, or representative. That's very different than a mayor, governor, or state assembly person. Now, of course, the spirit of the Tillman Act became violated because the Tillman Act does not limit individual contributions, so wealthy donors were able to get around the limits on contributions from corporations. The thing I want you to remember in lobbying is every time we make a law trying to regulate the practice of lobbying, the lobbyists, who are also lawyers, find some sort of a loophole to get around it. That's kind of going to be a repeat theme throughout this module. So after the Tillman Act, Congress began to continuously add more and more to the body of election law so that none of the measures limit the influence of what continued to be the main source of campaign funding, corporations. Again, corporations always found a way around campaign contribution restrictions. And this became even more evident with Nixon passing the Federal Election Campaign Act, also known as FECA, in 1971, which made disclosure rules and requirements a little bit tighter or a little bit more rigorous when it came to campaign contributions and expenditures. Now, because of Watergate, Congress extensively added to FECA in 1974, and what they tried to do was limit corporate influence. But again, over the next 30 years, it has continued to fail has continued to fail to do so. Now we're going to talk about political action committees, or a PAC. A political action committee carries a company's name and is designed to make campaign contributions. However, PACs get their money from contributions by employees. So let's take your favorite S&P 500 company. Yes, it may be named Company X Political Action Committee, but it's not coming from the corporate treasury. It's coming from individual members of that company. So that money from the PAC is given to candidates based on decision by PAC officers who have to be employees of that corporation. And there's no dollar amounts that PACs may raise and spend. So PACs, of course, have continued to give more and more money quite dramatically ever since the mid-'80s. And some of you may experience PACs. And you think, well, if it's individuals giving money to the corporation, well, surely there's no sort of impropriety going on here, right? Because individuals are choosing to give or not. I have known many people who have worked, for example, for federal contractors, and there are PAC officials who go around those companies asking for donations, and people who do not give to the PAC are usually denied promotions, or they may not have their contracts renewed. So it may sound better that you're giving individual contributions instead of instead of corporate contributions, but trust me, there's still impropriety that goes on here. Now, another thing from political side is soft and hard money. So soft money is money that's unregulated, and that's as to the source or amount under federal election law. Hard money is money raised and spent under strict contribution limits in federal election law. Now, corporations are barred from directly contributing to campaigns, as we mentioned in our discussion of PACs, but the Federal Election Committee opened the door for them to give an unlimited amount of soft money contributions to national party committees. So in other words, you don't give money directly to a candidate, but you can give money to the party for that candidate. So you can't contribute to, I don't know, pick your favorite president, but you can give to the Republican or Democratic Party to support that candidate. And in 1996, the Supreme Court also held that soft money could be used for issue advertising. So there has been a lot of reform starting in the early 2000s. The first one was the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, and that was where national parties were prohibited from raising or spending soft money. However, corporations can still give an unlimited amount of soft money to advocacy groups for electioneering activity without any sort of restrictions. So the main thing I want you to just remember is that, yes, there's a lot going on with regards to regulating lobbying activity, but every time the government tries to regulate hard or soft money or any sort of lobbying activity, the lobbyist always finds some way around it. Another thing I want you to just think about, we typically think of lobbying in some sort of a negative light. But you also have to think of the fact that lobbying is a form of free speech. It is a form of speech also, that it's a form of speech or free speech. And if we were to restrict lobbying, we would in some way be restricting free speech. So we have to ask ourselves the question, which is more important? Restricting free speech to avoid the appearance of impropriety, or having the appearance of corruption-free elections. Lobbyists do perform a very important function in that they can represent and provide a speech platform for individuals who may not be able to get their point across to their politicians through access and through, of course, translating issues into jargon that politicians can understand. But why do some people get that access to politicians and not others? That's kind of the debate. Free speech, or is the speech freer for some and not for others? So we will continue our discussion of business and politics in our next video, and I'm looking forward to seeing you then.